Hello, everybody. We're back, and this time we're looking at the Obligatory Cthulhu expansion. And as usual, we'll just dive straight in. So the first pairing we've got is the Innsmouth #1 up against Minions of Cthulhu second seed. So Starspawn of Cthulhu and Return to the Sea. So Lee, do you want to kick us off on this one?
Yeah, let's be honest. If you're diving straight in, that is probably the last sea that you dive straight into, isn't it? It looks a bit grimy, but okay, we've got a couple of things at play here. Number one, and we've said this several times before, but I really love. In fact, I'll start again. Ultimately, a Return to the Sea, I think, was missed, wasn't it? The first go through, and it became a bit of a wild card and ended up first seed. So it's sort of nice to see it, and nice to see that it's had a little bit of recognition, because I do quite like this card. I like the fact that it's a special, and yeah, I think what was it you said you want to put on your gravestone, Luke? Something about liked minions back in his hand or something. But it's that kind of it's that kind of idea, and the fact that it's after a base is scored, you get to whip back minions, and that is a good card to have in any faction, in any deck, and especially because it lets you gain the power of scoring the points and then put the same named minions back in your hand, powerful with something like groupies, for example. I know we were talking about rock stars, and there was some discussion about them on the last video in the comment section. So it's interesting that you can use that as a bit of a driver to get some hands back. Obviously designed to work with the locals in this particular faction, but it's got a bit of a place, and I do quite like that as a concept. And on the other side of things, we've got a lovely artwork, delightful looking Starspawn of Cthulhu, and I think this might have been my #1 seed. I can't remember off the top of my head.
Elder Things had a lot of good picks.
Say again, sorry.
They had a lot of competitive picks.
They had
Minions of Cthulhu, sorry.
the Minions of Cthulhu, they did, and I tell you what, and it's not through the dislike of the whole concepts and stuff, but Madness has really put, I know, and I'm speaking particularly of myself and Luke, really, because I think we play more often than we get over to play with you, Mark, as well. But specifically, the Minions of Cthulhu are part of that Madness set of cards, and we've kind of actively ignored them a great deal because of the Madness mechanic, which is probably going to come up in discussion at some point a little bit later on, probably when we're talking about Elder Things. So it wasn't a great my knowledge of the individual factions wasn't massive, so it meant that I really got to delve into some cards that I'd not necessarily really played with before even, and that's what I found in terms of Minions of Cthulhu, that I was actually really quite excited to play with that faction when we get a chance to get together again. And not because it's dishing out massive amounts of madness, although I did have a little bit of a giddy, excited laugh thinking about piling on the madness into both of your hands. But Spawn of Cthulhu is quite a nice introduction to madness, almost. The whole Cthulhu set seemed like a bit of a nice introduction to madness, almost. Innsmouth kind of fringed it. They didn't really seem to use madness much at all. It kind of worked without the mechanic. Miskatonic were kind of somewhere 50-50, where you manage your own set, and Spawn allows you to, and Cthulhu allowed you to give a little bit away and take a little bit back, and I quite liked that as a concept in terms of how to manage the madness, or how to sort of introduce the madness into playing a little bit, really. So in terms of a favorite of these two, I lean a little bit towards Return to the Sea, simply because I get points for scoring a base. I get a card back in my hand, even if you use it on one minion to get your king minion back into your hand for whatever. If that's your engine card, if that's the important card within the faction, the important minion within the faction, then that's the sort of thing that you want back into your hand to play down again. And we've talked about Invader a number of times on this channel anyway. So when we talk about returning an Invader to your hand to plop an Invader down again, it's like another go around the sort of roseberry bush, and I'm a big fan of that as a concept. There's nothing against Starspawn. I think the artwork's fantastic, and I think it works quite well in terms of the faction, particularly ones that when you put madness cards into other, when you discard madness cards, when you get rid of madness cards, other things happen. It sort of links in with a big chain of other events that are going on. But I think, to me, the better card out of these two is probably Return to the Sea.
I would agree. I think Return to the Sea is the better of the two. The problem I have with Starspawn and Cthulhu is that it massively depends on the player count. And if you're playing two player where you have one person you're giving your madness cards to, it's way stronger because obviously you just keep adding it every turn. You give them another madness card, and they're struggling to keep up with actually getting rid of them. In a four-player game, for instance, like, who are you giving the madness cards to?
Luke.
If you get the madness, well, you give them to Luke. If you start getting the madness cards to Luke, and Luke's like really far behind, and then you start winning the game, and or someone else starts winning the game, you change your person you're giving them to. It that really weakens the impact of this card, having to split the madness cards up, because you really have to concentrate on one person at a time to actually make an impact. You have to use two turns to give them two madness cards for them to then lose a VP. And if they start playing those madness cards, you then have to keep on doing it to keep the pressure up. So you can't really focus on different players. You have to keep it on one person at a time. I think that's where in a two player, if it was two player, it'd be much closer. But we have to kind of consider the range of player counts. And for me, it really does struggle. And you're right, of course, in terms of the madness interactions. I think this is the only card in Minions of Cthulhu that can give madness to other players. I think everything else is all into faction, so it's into synergy. So this is almost the odd one out for Minions of Cthulhu, although they did obviously get Cthulhu as a Titan. But I think for me, Return to the Sea is just an amazing card in Innsmouth, and also as well in it. It is transferable to other factions. As you say, you can get one or two minions back, or even three of your power twos, or even getting all your groupies back, or whatever. It could be a really good return to your hand for your groupie play to drop 10 power the next turn. But particularly in the faction, it's a phenomenal card.
Yeah,
you get you've only got your locals, so you're always guaranteed to get 3, 4, 5, 6 locals back with this card. You then play them all down again, and you get your Dagon back out again quickly, and then you're all that's how you break your next base quicker than everyone else can actually react. So for me, it's Return to the Sea. But I think Starspawn and Cthulhu is it's obviously very strong. It's very strong to basically it's a 1 VP swing, because you're losing half a VP and they're gaining half a VP. Like, you're losing half a VP loss and they're gaining half a VP loss. So it's a bit of a swing, but for me, it's just the player count thing that really shafts this card, basically.
Yeah, Return to the Sea for me as well, please.
Got anything else you want to add, Luke, or are you happy with that?
Put them back in my hand after a base goes. Put it on my grave.
I can't remember the exact wording, but yeah, it was definitely something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a solid card, very solid card.
I cannot resist putting stuff back in my hand after a base goes.
Ooh.
Right, we've got a very different one here, and I didn't put Begin the Summoning. I don't even think Begin the Summoning made my top 3. So one of you guys is going to have to explain why you felt Begin the Summoning came through as the number 1 spot to me.
I think I need to check the rankings, because I can't quite remember putting in this as high as it went through. But still,
person had it as 1. Otherwise, it wouldn't have gone through as 1, surely.
Absolutely. Well, it's playing right into Luke's wheelhouse again, isn't it? It's minion back from the dead, so it's right up there. No, I think I'm the same. I'm torn with this as a pairing. Sorry, I sound like I'm going first again, but that's okay. I'm torn on this pairing because I didn't include Jinkies in my top 3 either. Now, in faction, within this set, it's obviously a fantastic card, because instead of discarding the 1, you're essentially, and putting into the terms that we keep sort of going back to, it's gaining yourself a VP back by discarding 2 madness cards. And it works really well in the Miskatonic faction, because there's so many talents or extra plays that allow you to do extra things but incur a madness penalty into your hand, and this is the kind of card that works with some of the power 3 minions that they've got, that essentially chucks that madness back into the madness pile and allows you to operate really quite efficiently by gaining extra plays. So it's a fantastic card in its own right, or in its own faction, or even in this particular set. But it's not one that I am particularly keen on putting through, because if we're looking for, and again, I kind of made this point, or perhaps didn't make it clearly enough last time we were talking about these things, but in the Rockstars, for instance, where I was saying that their King Minion wasn't particularly good, I think he's a fantastic, amazing King Minion. I know we agreed on this, Mark. An amazing King Minion in terms of how his engine works to drive the Rockstars forward. The Monarch, and obviously looked awesome with my shades on, but still, fantastic card to drive that faction forwards. But outside of his faction, and I understand that you would never play that card without the rest of that card's faction. However, in the concept of what we are describing here, we are trying to identify the best card in the set. Well, Jinkies to me is not the best card in the set, to be perfectly honest. Begin the Summoning is very much not the best card in the set either, but I think getting a minion back from your discard pile and playing an extra action is more powerful than returning Madness cards in the grander scheme of the game. Because in the grander scheme of the game, there are 98 more factions. I actually don't know how many there are off the top of my head. I've never properly looked.
It's 82 now with Marvel.
Well, there you go. So there's 78 more factions outside of this one expansion that don't use Madness at all. So to me, Jinkies is not useless, because it's very much not useless. It's a fantastically powerful card in its own faction, in its own set. But outside of that, which is what we are looking at, Begin the Summoning is a better card, in my opinion.
Yeah, it's a tricky one, because obviously this expansion has its own unique gimmick in Madness, so we can't really ignore the Madness gimmick. But I mean, just to touch on what you were mentioning there, and I mentioned it in the comments of the last video, but for me, a very good, the best card in Smash It would be an excellent card in its faction, but also as well, it has that element of transferability and universality. It's good in any, it could be dropped into any faction, and that faction would be improved by it. So that's kind of the, and I mean, you can go back and look at the comments of the last one. I kind of explained it in more detail there, but I think that's really what I'm looking for. And Jinkies for me is, it's a phenomenal card in the Miskatonic University faction, but I think it's an amazing card in Miskatonic University because Professor is so good. And I think that's the issue for me, is that it draws its strength from Professor, and I could never, if this were to go through, for instance, maybe let's say it's got through to the final, it has to be Professor, because Professor is so good, and because Professor is so good, Jinkies is brought up by Professor. So that's kind of why I'm struggling with Jinkies here, because it is it's a good card in a sense. It could say on it, gain a VP back, could be its text, and that would be, a fundamentally amazing card. But you don't really have too many problems with Madness in Miskatonic University. You accrue a little bit of it, but you have other ways of getting it back as well as a psychologist. But really, you're using it heavily with the Professor, and that's where Jinkies gets better. So for me in this pairing, it's probably going to be Begin the Summoning, although I don't actually think it's the number one spot for Elder Things. But I think fundamentally, we saw it's gone into the All-Star faction, so it is a fundamentally good transferable card, and lots of factions would appreciate getting a minion back to the top of the deck to draw straight into it, getting your action straight back, so it's free. So I think for me, it's Begin the Summoning. Jinkies is amazing in Miskatonic University, and I'm sure any of these Madness factions would appreciate Jinkies, but for me, it's just this thing where it's being brought up by Professor because of how good Professor is. So it's hanging on Professor's coattails, really, for me.
Yeah, Beginner Summoning is great. I think I don't think you guys are the biggest fan of it, but it's a free move, really. It costs you one card to get a minion back and then play another action still. That's just solid. You're going to draw into it next turn. It's great. I really like it.
Yeah.
In or out of the other things, I think it's good.
I mean, you might even draw into it faster if you play your Librarian, I think it is, and you draw a card and you get the minion straight back. You could even draw into it on the same turn because of the top of your deck. Just one card.
Absolutely.
So yeah,
absolutely.
I think it's good. I think it's better than Jinkies.
I don't
Jinkies really. So.
Yeah, sorry. Go on, look.
I like Jinkies. I think it works within the concept of everything. I think you need ways to get. For me, there aren't enough ways to put Madness cards back in the Madness deck, in or out of this set. I think putting cards back in your deck isn't a concept. Putting cards back in the Madness deck isn't a concept that exists outside this faction. It doesn't exist enough within this set. I think I want the free ability to put them back when someone else gives me them. and that's one of the reasons why we don't play with it a particular amount. If you play a set that doesn't contain any madness, it has no way of getting rid of madness. So all you're really doing is extending the game by some victory points, and that's fine, but it just makes the game last longer in a scenario where you've got a set amount of time to play this game on an evening or whatever. It extends the game a little bit further or makes you mess with some concepts. So I don't love it particularly, but
that's the thing. I agree with you, and we're getting into a discussion about madness here, which we were inevitably going to do. But for me, madness is a terrible mechanic, and a card like Jinkies sums up because it feels really bad to have to use your turn to return cards that didn't start in your deck, but will negatively impact the end of your game. So it just feels really bad. And the problem with madness, as you mentioned it there, like if you're not playing with a madness-based faction, your only way of getting rid of madness is to use your entire action-based turn to return it to the madness deck, and that feels awful. Like you play madness, you play smash up, you pick two factions because you want to do your thing. Like you could play, I don't know, wizards, musketeers. You want to be, bam, 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 playing all these stuff and like executing your combination and the strategy. You don't want to have to spend your turn just going, yeah, I'll put this card back into that deck and that's my turn. Like that just feels awful, and that's like the fundamental reason why I don't like madness. But a card like Jinkies, okay, it's returning 2 in 1 is better than returning 1 at a time, but I mean, it still just feels awful to use your turn doing that.
I didn't put Jinkies in the top 3 because I didn't want this to be a focus on madness, specifically because I think you appreciate that it just needs to be discarded, and that's kind of that. And all right, yes, fine, Jinkies is great because it allows you to discard 2, like you're saying, but ultimately, I don't have the problem with madness that you two seem to have, and I think that's because I like to play the game properly, and you like to break the game in stupid and silly ways that I think should be illegal. But in my opinion, the madness is a slowing down mechanic of the game, and I have to say I'm not a big fan of the fact that it counts for afterwards. I feel like there should be maybe some sort of more detrimental effect within the game. I'm not entirely sure how you would make it work, but it does feel a little bit ridiculous that you could win the game and not necessarily actually have won the game. And like you say, if you're playing against somebody who's playing Elder Things, you're going to have to score 15 20 victory points and score them fast, because otherwise you're going to have an entire deck full of madness.
Yeah, no, I don't disagree. So we're putting begin the summoning through.
Begin the summoning.
Yep.
So up on the left hand side, we've got something very different now. Really, this is probably the closest and toughest pairing so far, I'm going to say. So Furthering the Cause and The Price of Power. I'll start on this one then, because it's this one for me is really tough. And I mean, I absolutely love any card that has the word VP written on it. Is like my number one thing. That's exactly what I'm looking for in a card. And Furthering the Cause is just unbelievable. The issue is that Minions of Cthulhu can't really exploit this card. They have a few cards that let you destroy a minion, but you really need to play into this card. So your faction pairing has to be something that can really exploit and really destroy lots of other stuff. So you can really milk this card for everything you can get from it. The other side of the equation, so The Price of Power, can be probably the biggest before a base scores card in terms of power gain out of any card in the game. Elder Things have so many ways of distributing madness to other players' hands that you can actually just, you could feasibly get, especially in a 4-player game, you could very realistically get plus 10 power from this card, maybe even more if you, you played like your Insanity before this and maybe some other things in turns before, and you've seen that people haven't played their madness to get rid of it. So this card could be, plus 10 power, and if any card that says that, you basically win the base. So even if you've got like a power 3 minion on there or something, you give it plus 10 power, you probably won. It's such a ridiculous swing in terms of, the actual power you can get from it. The issue I have with The Price of Power, though, is that it is somewhat out of your control. So depending on what's happening with bases breaking and things like that, you have to obviously time it so that the base is going to break the turn that you've just distributed a whole load of madness cards to other players. So that's obviously the best time to do it. But if you go around and then someone's playing Miskatonic and they've used Jinkies and they've got rid of 2 madness cards from their hand, well, actually, how good is the price of power now? And you're having to keep track of what madness cards are in people's hands and what they're doing with it. Have they got rid of it on their turn? So there is a bit of an ongoing memory thing as well to actually keep a track of how much madness is actually out there. So there is that element to it as well. It can be quite a tricky card to time correctly, but it is a very strong card nonetheless. But for me, as I say, fundamentally, any card that says gain a VP is always going to be up there, and for me, in terms of one of the better cards. And destruction is something that is very common in the game. There are lots and lots of factions that have destruction. Even factions that shouldn't have destruction will have 1 or 2 cards that say, destroy a power 2 minion or whatever. So most pairings with minions at Cthulhu will have a destruction card, at least 1 destruction card. So you can potentially, play into this. And if they don't, well, you've at least got a couple of cards and minions at Cthulhu that can destroy other players' minions. So this will often be, 2, 3 VP if you're lucky, which is a great return on investment for a card, I would say. So it is a tricky one, this, for me, but I'd probably give the edge slightly to Furthering the Cause just because it's a bit more certainty for me than the price of power.
Can I just ask a quick question? If somebody else destroys somebody else's minions on that base, do you still get the VP, or does the person who did the destruction get the VP?
Playing a base at the end of every turn. Well, it's your action, isn't it? So you would get the...
You gain the VP.
Yeah, okay. I think that's better. I don't, like you said, I don't like the level of control that your opponent has over the price of power. If you're playing against Elder Things, you're going to want to get rid of them. Nobody's going to sit on a handful of madness cards and just essentially lose the game. You're going to try and get rid of them, and you have to keep track of them. And particularly, like you said, Mark, where if you're in a 4-player game, how much can you concentrate the madness versus spreading it out versus which actually benefits you? I think there are other cards that give +2 bursts in a much better way. The Steampunks cards and things like that. I think the burst on those kind of actions is better than this. So I prefer Furthering the Cause.
I think it certainly has the potential to be a massive plus amount of power, like more than if you compare it with like Aggro for Steampunks +5. Do you take a guarantee +5, or do you take a chance of it being +2 or +12, like in that kind of range? So it's got a bit more certainty, like Aggro, but it could be huge, this card. It all comes down to timing.
To me, the price of power is the Dreamer's card. I know you were saying before, Luke, that your goal would be to discard Madness out of your hand, and I think that is true. It's one of the things that I do quite like about Madness is that it does force people to play your game rather than them getting to play their game, and I think that's a nice little gimmick that Madness does kind of add to it. And I get that does kind of wind people up, but I think that's kind of the purpose of the gimmick itself. I know that Elder Thing have ways of making you shuffle the Madness into your deck as well, so that you can't just discard it straight away, so that there's them kind of double annoyances that you really want to draw into that Madness to make sure that you're going to be able to discard it as well. So yeah, I think it's true as well. Furthering the Cause is to me the better card. It has the edge because it's talking about winning that VP. Again, it's sort of skipped my brain a little bit at the minute. Is there a base that lets you score VP for every kill?
Yeah,
there is, isn't there? Is it one of the Shark bases?
There's one.
There's one in this expansion, isn't there? I'm sure there's one in this. Let me have a.
There's one that is. There's 2 that I can think of off the top of my head. If you do the destroying, you get the VP.
That sounds
There's
right.
one that if you are destroyed, you get the VP.
Yeah, so there's Mushroom Kingdom in Core Set where it's if you're destroyed, you get the VP. There's Field of Honor in Awesome Level 9000 Bear Cavalry one where if you destroy something, you get a VP. I'm sure there's one in this expansion. Let me just check the base list. Hold on.
Either way, I think the whole idea of the action that does that is really, really good. And I think I was just trying to liken it to something else that I've seen somewhere else, and I was sure that there was at least one base that I could think of that had a VP associated with death on there. And I know I've seen that Mushroom Kingdom gimmick be used a few times where you've I think you may have even been you were Sharks, I think, and eating your own Mako or something that was on that base was just another way of powering up your great right, your Hammerhead, one of the two, and sort of gaining yourself VP as well. So yeah, I completely agree that the VP concept in there is what makes that so powerful.
It's it is a minion of Cthulhu base. I don't know how it's pronounced, but it's Ryella or something. And it says at the start of each player's turn, that player may destroy one of their minions here. If they do, they gain a VP.
Oh.
So I suppose it's potentially like cashing in on, they gain a VP, you gain a VP as well if they choose to destroy it.
It's a really nice base to play that on.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And it does stop as well. It stops some factions. So if you play this on you're playing against killed plants, you play this on a days, start of their turn, the sprout
destroy. Yeah,
gain a VP.
That's a good
any
point.
faction that uses destruction to deliver their own engine, you can
what about the old mild-mannered citizen?
Is that destroyed though?
I don't remember.
I think it's.
I never cared enough to learn.
Yeah, it's destroyed.
I never cared enough to learn.
No,
it's been destroyed.
Yeah. Yeah, it's this hard count as your madman citizen, Luke.
Oh no, it's so good till then.
Right, next.
So what did we actually agree on there? I lost track.
Further in the cause.
Further in the cause.
Right.
All three of us.
Did anyone? No, okay, no one thought.
That's general consensus for all three cards that have gone through so far.
It's just a really risky. It's a great special. It's just a little bit of
It is the Dreamer's card, and in another day, if it didn't have anything to do with Madness, Luke might have been all over that. But yeah,
we don't particularly love add 2 for every whatever card. That type of card. I don't love those kind of cards. I prefer to have minions and for permanent power and stuff like that.
Conversely, compared to Star Spawn and Cthulhu, which is better at 2 players, that's obviously better at 4 players because you can dish out way more madness than with Elder Things with more players compared to.
Plus, pretty much every card you play down in Elder Things gives somebody a madness card. So.
Oh yeah, it's ridiculous. They slash it tomorrow.
Just chucking it around. I love that.
Right, we've got.
Can't wait to play.
We've got 7.5 minutes. Should we go to the next one?
Yeah, we'll do this one.
Yeah.
Do the next one, or do we go to the next call?
I don't think this is going to be a particularly long discussion. This one, is it?
Not for me.
Sacred Circle then. 3 Sacred Circles.
Clean sweep. I mean, I've already kind of said my piece on the on how good Professor is, but like Professor is unbelievable in the faction. It's one of the best, king minions in the game, and it's Miskatonic University. If you don't get your Professor out, is a significantly worse faction than Miskatonic University. If you do get your Professor out, and that is how good it is. It's a ghostly arrival every turn. If you want to do that, you wouldn't necessarily do it because discarding a madness card every turn might not be the best thing to do, unless you've got Jinkies or Miskatonic University. I think the base in play where you can just get rid of all your madness cards back to the deck, but it's just such a good ability. It's time warp basically without the draw 2, playing that extra minion extraction every single turn on top of your regular minion and action play. You're basically having 2 turns every turn for someone else's 1 turn. So that pace of the game, you are far and away exceeding everyone else's pace in the game. So for me, it's clear cut. There's no contest here. I mean, Sacred Circle is all right in Innsmouth. It helps them to play them down quickly, and it's
not even all right on Innsmouth. Every time I've played Innsmouth, I've tried to use Sacred Circle to get something out of it, and every time I've failed because it's just not. There's never the right opportunity to be able to use Sacred Circle properly. But yeah, sorry.
It lets you go for that double base break, doesn't it? Really, but I mean they got Dagon, which lets them do. Dagon got the same ability as this, so they don't really. I suppose Dagon almost replaces in a sense. This can be played on a different base and you can start to build up in a second area, but there's no contest here. Compared to Professor, it's just an easy one. Professor is so good.
I'm sad that Locals number 4 didn't make it through as our second seed. But,
it's not as good as 1, 2, or 3.
Oh no, I heard.
But yeah,
they're the originals.
No contest.
They're the OGs.
I'm a fan of the clone.
Because Professor,
Put me down for Professor. Professor's great.
I mean,
Professor's great.
as I said, it's got those cards like Jinkies that can, it can get the Madness card. So you could play Professor a couple of times.
Comparing
distractions.
Comparing Professor to because I'll be murdered in the comment section if I don't say something like this. So I feel like I should raise this point. Professor compared to the Monarch, for example, because Professor outside of his faction arguably doesn't really do a great deal either, because presumably outside of his faction he won't have any Madness cards to discard.
I thought we learned the lesson that we're not taking things out of the faction again.
No, but we're looking for the best card in Smash Up, aren't we? That's what we're looking for. So again,
yeah, but if
looking
you play
at this
with
card
this
exclusively,
I agree. I completely agree, Lee. And the only reason it's clear cut in this is because Sacred Circle is such a niche.
Yes,
they're playing the same name, which is incredibly niche. So this like walks over Sacred Circle.
This is what I'm saying though, is that this card is on its own basically as good as the Monarch, because on its own it's only a power 5 minion with basically nothing else it can do.
No, but if you play with this card, you get Madness. That is how it works. You can't have this card without Madness. It doesn't exist.
That's like saying you can't have the Monarch without the groupies. I understand. I fully understand that when you are playing with this card, you're playing. But we've talked about this over the last couple of weeks about making a like our best of cards. And if you're picking a king minion to go in, it's probably not going to be Professor, because in the all likelihood that you're allowed one king minion and you're picking Professor, there's a very good chance that you won't have Madness access anywhere else in your faction. So I am not saying that you ever have a chance where you are playing with Professor on his own outside of the rest of the faction, but I am saying that whilst his talent is great, it very much is pretty useless if you don't have any Madness cards.
Thing is, I think it comes down to how it's an individual judgment. How far do you want to take the fact, like the context of the faction and the card it's in? So if you take that the whole way and you don't consider Professor outside of its outside of the context, outside of the faction, then it's obviously going to be an amazing card. If you take that most of the way and then consider outside of the faction as well and that transferability, then it's going to be an excellent card. But then you've got to factor in some of those other things as well, and like consider it in the whole rather than just in the very specific thing that it does. And as well, I suppose you can consider the concept as well, in the sense of the Professor's Power 5 that comes bundled with a ghostly arrival for a loss of half a VP. As like a broad concept, that's kind of what it does. And the Monarch is actually, I think you mentioned this, Tank, in terms of the Monarch being a power 2 minion from your deck, a very specific power 2 minion as a broad concept. That's what the Monarch does.
Yeah,
I suppose you can consider it in those terms as well. But I mean, it's an individual judgment, isn't it, as to how you're individually ranking and assessing how good these cards are.
Absolutely, and that's basically what I was saying in terms of the talent that this particular minion has compared to an equivalent minion, for example, the Monarch. And I know that that was a big discussion point for the last video. To me, the Professor is a better card because I believe his talent is more transferable. Instead of just drawing a 2-power minion, a specific 2-power minion, and one that makes that faction go and is very, very powerful within that faction and makes that faction actually interesting to play, to me, the Professor is more transferable, is the point I'm making.
Yeah. All right. So next up, we've got Return to the Sea and again, the Summoning. To be honest, I'd say this is probably one of the weakest semi-finals we've had in quite some time, I'd say. I'm not particularly, I mean, I said it in the first round, I'm not particularly wowed by Begin the Summoning. It's just a solid card. Certainly, in my opinion, not one of the better cards in Elder Things. It's just solid. Whereas Return to the Sea is obviously a really good special in Innsmouth, and it's a decent, could be a decent special for any other faction. So I'd probably carry on and say that Return to the Sea is the better card here. Elder Things, they do need they do appreciate the recovery. You can get back your
Bayaki,
Shoggoth and Bayaki and things like that, because obviously you want to be getting Elder Thing out over and over again, but to do that you have to destroy 2 minions, so you do need that recycling through Begin the Summoning. So it is solid for that reason. But I think for me it's just a fair card. It's not something that I could happily say is one of the best cards in Smash Up. from a personal point of view, I just don't think it's anything really wows me about it. Whereas at least Return to the Sea is something a bit different. It's it's very impactful in its faction. It's decent otherwise. So I think for me, it's Return to the Sea.
Yeah, I agree with that. I hadn't really thought about it until Lee said it earlier, but this card made me think I want as many minions back in my hand as possible, but you can just use it as a straight up get one king minion back. And that swung it quite a lot for me because I was thinking, okay, yeah, you can get all your locals or you can get a handful of power twos or, that kind of thing. But really, I would take it just to get my king minion back again. So it's an easy win for me, this. Return to the Sea. Return to my hand.
Return to my hand. Do you think about this like a zombie lord, for example? If you're playing a zombie lord and let all your locals go to the discard pile, it doesn't matter. Play zombie lord again. All the locals come back out the discard pile. To me, it's Return to the Sea as well. But I do just want to say, I think Begin the Summon is better than we've given it a little bit of credit for. If you look at that, I know Luke mentioned it earlier on. It's an extra card play. And it's a guarantee that what you're going to get out the top of the next draw phase, or if you can draw into that turn, the next card that you get out is a card that you actually want, and that could be one of your more powerful minions. I think it's a very good card actually, and what I really like about it is in my head and in my rules for this particular series that we're doing, it's particularly transferable as an action. Now, I don't think one of the best factions, it's one of the best actions. I don't think it's one of the best cards that we've talked about, but I think this is probably a fairer comparison of cards than we've had in a long time. But for me, it's Return to the Sea. Again, Luke's gravestone has spoken for me on this one.
I think you just made the killer point as to why Begin the Summoning should not go any further. And I think they've obviously made an all-star faction, and an all-star faction cannot have absolutely top tier cards in it. It has to be a fair, balanced faction. And Begin the Summoning went into the All Stars. So I think that's, that raises the flags in terms of Begin the Summoning is a fair card. It's a decent card, and it makes an All Star faction for a balanced, fair card. But it's not a groundbreaking, going to win the game sort of card. Whereas I actually think it's better in the All Stars, strangely enough, because you can actually get your King Rex back over and over again. And I think that's the main reason for playing it. I think, as I say, I think it is better in the All Stars, strangely, than it is in Elder Things. But yeah, I think you just hit the nail on the head by saying it's in, if you're making like an All Star faction, well, it's in the All Stars, so it's it's just a fair card. So I think
to me, it's a good card. It's better than fair. It's a good card. You get to have something back. You get to play an extra card that turn. I think it ticks all the boxes for me. You get to pick what you want out of it. You control the whole thing. You're entirely in control of the whole thing. There's no relying on showing some opponent's blue fish or something. I don't know. I just off the top of my head. It's entirely your own doing. It's entirely your own card. It's entirely in your control. You get something that you want back, and you get to play an extra action. I like that, but I prefer to score points on a base and then get my mini back after.
It's an interesting one, this actually, because we obviously put Chicken Soup through as the winner, and Chicken Soup is get 2 cards at the top of the deck. Would you rather get 2 cards at the top or one minion to the top and get the extra action?
Extra action. Add 2 cards to me because the 2 cards can be anything from actually. This is you double terraforming. This is one of your criteria, isn't it, for picking a card, Mark? So do I get to use terraforming again? Yes, I do. There it is. It's that right again.
You get Invader back with Begin.
Invader. Ooh, yeah.
That's tasty. Yeah,
you get that back with Chicken Soup as well, don't you? You could have any 2 cards.
Well, Chicken Soup, you could get 2 Begin and Summonings back.
2 invaders. You get 2 invaders. Think of the possibilities.
Return to the Sea. I think that's just the way it's shaped up. I think that's quite a weak side of the draw, actually.
What makes me laugh is that Return to the Sea was missed at the start of the discussion that we were having. All of these things.
Wasn't it stuck to
originally Sacred Circle was going to be the number 1 seed, and Locals would have been the number 2.
Yeah, wasn't it stuck to your another card, Luke, when you were flicking through your?
Yeah. Yes, it was.
The old pizza hands.
I was like, "What are you guys talking about?" I didn't even see this one.
I've never heard of this card.
I blame Dave.
So the more competitive side of the draw then, up on the
I mean,
final stage.
I don't even know if it is. I think the left hand side's good and balanced, and the right hand side is rubbish apart from Professor. I don't think the right hand side's a more competitive side. I think it just got Professor absolutely stacking itself.
Come on, man. He's trying to build up the suspense here, Liz.
Yeah. Okay. Guess what I'm picking?
Go on then, Lee. You start.
It's further in the cause, isn't it?
No. Professor's great. Mark's touched on it all already. It's fantastic. You get so much reward for discarding your madness card that it becomes worth it. As a minimum, you can discard one madness card for no effect, because you need two, don't you, for a -1 victory point. And then you get the extra minion extra action. That on its own is probably worth it still. It's close to being a time walk, give or take the draw and the extra 2 cards. Plus you get a power 5. I think even if you just did that one play, it's still a great card. And sometimes you're going, okay, is it worth it to put these down? How many victory points am I going to gain or lose for doing this versus discarding that madness card? Plus, if you always end yourself on an odd number, okay, you could do this 3 times and swallow 1 victory point, or 5 times and swallow 2. There's points where it's worth it, and I think furthering the cause needs too much extra setup. Like Matt was saying, you need mins that can destroy, and you need something to destroy. If you put that on a base that's full of minions, you need to destroy them or they'll try and break it, or you need to put it on a base and then no one's going to play on it again. So you need to time that right, then be able to destroy them. And I don't think that's as easy to set up as Professor is. And I think the rewards are good from furthering the cause, but there's better ways to earn victory points. And I think Professor is fantastic.
I'll let Mark finish, but yeah, I agree with everything you've just said there. Realistically, the further in the cause is good, but it's, to me, it kind of in my sort of hierarchy of importance, it's a little bit outside of my own control. Like you said, if you're in a 4-player game, for example, and the base has got loads of minions on it, there's a good chance that you might not even see any victory points from it, because by the time it comes around to your turn again, there might have been nothing there when you played it, and now there's everything there ready for you to break it with 1 minion play down. And if you can't play your minion, you might not be able to destroy. So for me, it's Professor, simply because it says and it's that and or extra action that I get really juicy about. I'm a big fan of the additional plays. So yeah, for me, it's Professor.
I mean, the Professor's going through because you guys want to see Professor through.
Wait, do you not?
It says VP on the card, doesn't it?
Yeah,
it does say 1 and VP on the card text. The thing is, I think you mentioned a good point there about you can't proactively play furthering the cause, because as soon as you put it out on a base with no minions on it, no one will play that base. So you can't proactively play it, but you could play it sort of mid power level on a bit. So like the base is at mid power breaking, you play furthering the cause down, you destroy something, so you gain a VP at the end of that turn. It is a little bit out of your control. So if you're playing a 4-player game and someone's gone with sharks and another pairing, someone's gone with pirates, someone's gone with, I don't know, vampires or something, loads of destruction pairings in that combination, then this card could be theoretically amazing, because if you put it on a competitive base and people can't help to destroy things because a lot of their actions say to destroy stuff, well, then you could be, and it's not just, I don't know, people may miss on this, but it's not just a VP, obviously, at the end of your turn, the end of every turn. So in theory, by the time it comes around to you in a 4-player game, you could have got 4 VP off it, 1 off your turn and 3 off everyone else's turn. So if they do that, then fair play. They probably shouldn't be playing Smash Up, but still, it could potentially have that potential of being game 4 VP before it comes around to you.
As if any of us are going to let any other of us gain 3 victory points just to destroy stuff. Lee was on about filling my hand with madness cards just to upset me. I don't think he's giving me any free victory points.
and actively destroy, but nothing. Sharks, no, they can't destroy. They definitely can't destroy.
You'd rather destroy yourself than let me
I'd
have
rather
a
destroy
victory point.
myself than give you a victory point. You're 100% right.
But I think in terms of favoring the cause, yes, it's a plane-based action, so it is vulnerable to, actions and minions that can destroy land-based actions. So it does have that weakness. But I think for me, it's just because you can guarantee yourself one VP from the card on the turn you play favoring the cause if you play, because minions of Cthulhu have loads of way of playing extra actions. You can guarantee one VP on your turn. If it gets around to you again, you can get another VP, and at that point, it's surpassed Professor for me. But it is just a little bit out of your control. But I would be putting favoring the cause through, but you both want Professor through, so
I would
no,
say
I'm not sad. I'm not sad to see Professor go through, but for me, cheating ways of cheating extra VP is what the game is all about for me.
But
100%, 100%, and I agree. But I just don't. I can't see. You have to have the exact right criteria to make further in the cause pay for itself. Because I understand what you're saying. Really, you only need 2 VP, and all of a sudden, it's one of the better cards in the game. Because if it gives you 2, if you have a whole hand of cards that give you 2 VP every time you play them, even if it takes you 2 turns to do that, you're going to win the game regardless, because there's no way of stopping that. But it doesn't just instantly give you a VP. There is a criteria that you need to satisfy in order to gain that VP, and that's what I think is out of your hands. If you're, I mean, God, we've talked about those examples as well. Bear Cavalry, for example. Oh, I'm sorry, General Ivan's out. None of the minions are actually destructible. Well, that says if another player's minion was destroyed. Is this one of those things again where it says destroy your minion, and all of a sudden, the minion can't be destroyed, therefore I'm going to gain a free victory point? Is that how this is going to work?
No, it does have to be destroyed.
Right, but I'm sure because of course it had to be destroyed before as well, didn't it? So anyway, we're not going to get back into another General Ivan discussion or a body shop discussion. But my point is that it requires too many things to be satisfied. If you've got anything above a power 2 minion, you're going to struggle to get it destroyed easily.
Yeah, I can't remember my listing, but I think I maybe put the Seal is Broken ahead of this card, because the Seal is Broken is another Cthulhu card where you can just gain a VP, take a Madness card. So I think that one for me was maybe better just because of the consistency of it. You can first time you play it is always a VP.
I think I put that one ahead. Either way, Professor's better.
Yeah,
Gonna be interesting to see this final then. As I feel like Return to the Seas almost had like a free pass here, really, through to the final. For an Innsmouth card, which, by rights are all pretty horrible, I suppose, apart from Dagon. It's almost had a bit of a free ride here.
Who's going first then?
I'll go first if you want.
Go on then, Luke.
I like Return to the Sea. I love Recursion, but Professor is better.
Easy.
Yeah. Do you need me to elaborate any more on that, or is that okay?
You've said everything I need to hear.
Can
a card that is so specific and not transferable win a round, Luke?
I don't buy into that. If I will accept considering him on himself, but if the card specifically references Madness cards, you can't consider him even for a second without having the option to play and manipulate the Madness deck. So in my head, that situation doesn't exist. So in my head, I've always got Madness cards. I've always got the option to use this. And you better believe I'm going to use this and end up with an odd number of Madness cards in my discard if that is within my control. So then it just becomes about, is it worth it? And I can sit there and decide that each time. I like Return to the Sea. I think it's a good card. I've spoken very highly of it. I love getting minions back. It follows the same effective things I like in the game, being special and getting something back after the base scores and getting multiple. It's a very good version of that because you can get multiple cards. But who doesn't want to play an extra minion and an extra action every turn? Archmage is super strong, and that just lets you play an extra action. So there's a small downside of the.
Do you want to be using this talent every single turn, though?
Sorry?
Do you want to use this talent every turn?
No, but I will use it.
Yeah, in the faction, yeah, you do, because you've got a lot of Purge Madness abilities within the faction, realistically.
Yeah, if you are playing in theory, you can discard a Madness card and discard a Madness card and put one back to the deck every turn because you've got your extraction play. So if your minions are helping you do things like that as well, okay, yeah, you've used a Madness card that's gone into your discard pile, but you're getting an extra minion and you could get rid of an extra Madness card that was in your hand. You've just got choices. And even if you just accept the fact that you can have Madness in your discard pile, you're still getting an extra minion, extra action every turn. And that's very hard to disagree with, really.
I think the fact that it's not like an extra minion, play an extra minion on this base, the fact that you can put Professor somewhere else, put it in a corner, and then use that ability over and over again and break other bases and leave the Professor out. If it was play on the Professor's base, it would certainly be a weaker card because then obviously the base would break so much faster. And the fact that you will have Miskatonic University in the base deck is an excellent target for the Professor. I think, well, for shuffling all your Madness cards back into the or putting them back into the Madness deck. I think I suppose the issue. I mean, it is a very good card. I think ultimately I'd probably be settling on the Professor just because I think Return to the Sea is decent, but I think it's been freeloading here basically. I think it's come through to the final, perhaps undeserved maybe, although the competition wasn't great. But I think for me it's Professor, but it's good. It's great, and it's the best card in the faction. Its ability is fundamentally very strong as a concept. It's just for me, it's that whole. Would it be a nice slot into another faction? Not particularly, but the majority of my opinion is formed by the fact of how good it is in its faction. So I think for me in this particular pairing, it's with Professor. Although Return to the Sea is much more transferable.
I mean, I'm sticking to my own guns, sticking to my own arguments. To me, the whole purpose of the discussion that we're having, these evenings that we're dedicating to talking about these wonderful cards, is where we're looking for the best card in the whole. And to me, that it can't be the Professor, because the Professor requires the Madness. Now, I am not saying that Professor is not a good card, and I am not saying that you ever play without everything else that the Professor has associated. But to me, the most transferable card is Return to the Sea. That said, I'm probably leaning towards Professor because I think the and/or extra action, extra minion play, basically every turn, it just to me makes it really worthwhile. I mean, you've got 2 Jinkies in your deck, you've got 3 Psychologists in your deck. That's just purging the madness out of your deck. I mean, all right, you've got researchers and librarians and stuff that are pulling madness into your deck, but I know one of the ones that I was really excited to talk about, and we never really put it through in the end, was Old Man Jenkins. That was probably one of my favorite ones, because we've talked a little bit about the ability to destroy a powerful minion. In fact, I think we were talking about it in one of the teddy bear ones. We were talking about Love Overload, and we said the problem with Love Overload was that it doesn't let you specifically target a minion. I guess Old Man Jenkins doesn't really either, but that's the same kind of concept.
It's a slightly worse card actually than Love Overload,
because it doesn't destroy multiple, or at least it doesn't destroy your own. Well, I guess it would if it was the highest power minion there. Either way, that was that was the other one I was kind of considering, and I was excited to talk about that because it was a bit different. But to me, Professor's its own niche. It's got its own little cool gimmick, and it is the driving engine behind Miskatonic, using the madness to its own effect. And I like that. I like that as a concept. That said, I love the idea of being able to pull something straight off a base after it's scored and get that back into my hand and play that down again. So I guess I'm kind of torn between the two. Professor, if I'm looking exclusively for the better card, as in which one is the better card on its own, outside of everything else, Return to the Sea is the better card on its own, outside of everything else. But as soon as you pull all of the faction stuff into it, Professor's a better card by probably hands down by miles.
I think this expansion is obviously a very unusual expansion in that obviously it's got this gimmick deck around madness and this gimmick mechanic. And I think if you were to ask someone what's the best card in Obligatory Cthulhu, Professor would probably come quite high in that list. if you then expanded that out to what's the best card from the Obligatory Cthulhu in the game, so looking at the entire game, it may be a different answer. But I think it's just one of those strange ones where Professor is, undoubtedly the best card in the expansion. But then if you widen that field out to the whole game, I think it will fall away in terms of the Champions tournament.
To me, I'm happy to say that Professor takes it and I'm happy to say that we're including Madness in the Professor's sort of abilities, if you like, because of what we did for when we talked about Big in Japan, where we naturally assumed that the Titan was also in play, because of course that was the gimmick that was introduced during the Big in Japan set. So I presume in this scenario we're saying the same thing, that the gimmick is also included. In that case, it's Professor for me.
Well, that's the thing. The Titans have to be part of the deck, like the faction. You can't play Kaiju without Gorgonzola because it's a fundamental part of the faction.
Half your cards wouldn't do anything.
But the Mystical Tournament University doesn't start with any Madness in its faction. You have to actually draw it from another deck.
That's
so you're actively choosing to take on Madness in order to use some of these abilities. So it's not directly comparable to me, because the Titans, for something like the Kaiju Gorgonzola, is different to a separate Madness deck.
Yeah, okay, I accept that.
Luke, were you saying Professor, are you?
Yep.
Lee, you're saying Professor?
I am.
Yeah, I think I'll say Professor as well, but I'm not. I don't know. It just doesn't feel like a satisfying result for me, really.
I mean, none of this set is satisfying in any way, shape, or form. So it's probably quite apt.
I don't know if I agree with that anymore. I think I did before we really started looking into it. But for me, the excitement was around looking at cards that I've never really played with and continue to have never played with until we all get together again for the next time and I get to load Madness into your hand like there is no tomorrow.
Great.
Just both of us playing Elder Things against Luke.
Oh, yeah. We'll play Dupe Rules allowed, so we're allowed Elder Things robots, you and me, just ploughing things down and chucking the Elder Thing out and forcing him to take Madness into his hands.
Well, we may as well probably add two Madness decks together, so there's 60 cards, so Luke can have more than 30 Madness cards in his hand deck and discard pile.
Well, I'll play Dragons then. We can just really kill this thing. Kill this game.
Just to really make sure we never ever play again.
Yeah. I mean, that's not played Smash Up for over a year, but here you go. Hope you like having negative victory points.
The game has ended and the total final score is -12, -10, and -9.
That's a really interesting point about the Dragons, though, in that Ruins, I think, is an acceptable way of losing victory points, whereas Madness to people's hands is not an acceptable way of losing victory points, because you can choose not to play on the Ruins base. It's fair.
It happens as part of the game.
Turn. Yeah,
it's mechanics as part of the game, and that's the fact that the Madness counts afterwards is what puts me off a bit. But the general concept of it, I've got no problem with.
Yeah. Okay. Happy days. We're all sorted. So Professor is through to the champions. I think this is the 8th one now. So I think we're halfway through on the field. We've got to complete one side of the draw. We just need to finish it off now. Decide what we're going to do next. So with that being said, I think we'll wrap up and say goodbye, and we'll see you on the next one.
See you on the next one. Don't forget to like and subscribe.